everyone. Going to get us started. I know there's a few people still kind of trickling in. The eagle-eyed among you will notice that I am not Mike Ritchie. Mike unfortunately couldn't join us, so I got the chairing gig for today. So you're all going to be sick of me by the end of the day because I'm in every session now for the rest of the day. But yeah, got an amazing panel for you for this circular economy session. We will do questions, but we'll save them all to the end. So while people are speaking, just be thinking of what questions you want to ask. But let's kick off straight away. So our first speaker is Shannon Smyth. Shannon is the manager of the Markets Acceleration team at Sustainability Victoria. Shannon is a partnerships guru, really helping to drive demand for recycled content, finding new uses for recycled material, and building confidence in the market. And yeah, that's what he's going to talk to us about. Shannon.
Thanks, Claire. I'm always a little concerned about being referred to as a guru. I sort of conjure up images of Don Burke in the garden digging out potatoes or something, but I'll take it nonetheless. So good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me present today at the Waste Expo. It's been some years between visits, but yeah, really pleased to hear quite an interesting sort of, I guess, cross-section of activity right across Australia, and bit of a focus, I guess, on New South Wales, which is probably expected given where we are, but really pleased today to provide a bit of an overview, I guess, around some of the work that Sustainability Victoria are doing in terms of delivering on Victorian Government's circular economy policy. So I'll provide a bit of an overview of some of the programs, a little bit of a, I won't call it a sales pitch, but an overview of some of the investment and some of the programs that we're delivering. And I'm pleased to say they address some of the feedback I've heard in the sessions over the last couple of days too, particularly around sort of government action and what that actually looks like as tangible action on the ground. I'll touch on partnerships and collaboration. I'll probably say those two words more today than I've ever said them in my life, but it is a really important part to what we do at SV. So let's kick off with who we are. We're a statutory authority established with our own act. We sit within the environment portfolio and report into Minister for Environment. We work quite closely with our portfolio colleagues in DECA, EPA, and also Recycling Victoria as well. Essentially, our purpose is to accelerate Victoria's transition to a circular, climate resilient and clean economy. So we recently released it's probably not that recent, it was last year, but our strategy and overview, which really is SV 2030, and as the name suggests, this is going to guide our action for the next 10 years. Included within that plan, obviously some key targets that align back to some of the state government driven targets as well. I guess most notably, you'll see strong focus on resource recovery and organics diversion, which are a couple of things I'll be focusing on today. So a little bit around what we do and how we do it. Essentially, there's sort of three key pillars to our activity on the ground. Investment in innovation, or investment through innovation in some cases, behaviour change and education, but also community action, place-based action with communities that are interested and engaged. And we're seeing a lot of that, particularly in the renewable energy space in Victoria at the moment. So I don't think this image is going to be anything new to anyone at the conference this week. I hope it isn't anyway, but again, our ambition in some respects is very much sort of, simplified by that diagram, moving away from linear and moving towards a circular. Draw your attention to, now I was struggling when I was preparing for this, left. It is on the left, I think for everybody, not just me, is really, I guess, how we've gone about breaking up the circular economy and understanding the components within that we need to intervene in as government to help instigate, catalyse and progress some of the action for a circular economy under our policy in particular. This has obviously been useful for us in a program planning and development sense, but also useful for industry and partners that we engage with in delivery of our programs. And I'll touch a bit more on that shortly, but again, for us, varied offers, a lot of sort of activity right across the supply chain, right across a range of stakeholders. Really important for stakeholders to know what they should be speaking to us about, and perhaps more importantly, what they can get out of that conversation as well. It also ensures, or aims to ensure, that we avoid duplication between our program offers it's a broad portfolio with a range of roles and responsibilities, so we need to make sure that it's really clear who's doing what, and the term we use is joined up government, but I think it's just good collaboration if we're all clear in terms of our roles and responsibilities. So since release of the circular economy policy back in 2020, we've invested approximately $320 million into the resource recovery and broader now circular economy sector as well. So we're talking about 150 plus projects under delivery, 780 jobs as a result of that investment, but also, and again, it's more than just a resource recovery policy, but we've also helped to support the installation of approximately 1 million tonnes of additional resource recovery capacity within the network. This slide here is not just a nice map of Victoria. I'm always a bit cautious about these sorts of things after COVID where, sort of pockets of things have grown, but this really just aims to depict, not spread, but the spread of investment, so a geographical spread of where our money has gone and the projects that it goes to support. And I think it's really important just to acknowledge that a circular economy activity and the catalysing of activity within that space needs to be where local economies also prosper and also grow as well. So this just demonstrates that our thinking is certainly moved beyond just the traditional sort of economic centres that perhaps we think of when it comes to sort of economic policy and support as well. My little clicker's not working. So just coming back to the brilliant circle diagram, fortunately just in the centre this time, this is just a bit of an overview, I guess, of the suite of programs and projects currently under delivery out of Sustainability Victoria, all funded under the circular economy policy itself. There's quite a mix there, as you can see, and they're aimed to be colour-coded to help sort of, I guess, again, depict where they intervene and where they aim to support establishment of a circular economy or in some cases, resetting of an existing sector. I will point out just a couple of key things. Pretty obvious that a lot of those sit over at that recovery and collect side of things. And I think it's important just to acknowledge that this reflects the correction that was required in the sector post-China National Sword and a range of MRF, shall we say, related issues that we experienced in Victoria over the course of 2018, 2019. So an absolute need in us, investing into our resource recovery infrastructure to ensure that we have the right capacity, the right capability, but also a sector that was sustainable for the long term. But I'll also point out some of the other sort of more early stages of the circular economy cycle there and our investment into things like the Circular Economy Innovation Fund and the Business Support Program as well. We're not only looking at fixing those historic issues, but we're also looking with an eye over the horizon as well to bring together insight, research, data and analysis to really inform where we need to go next, not only in our investment, but also our program and policy support as well. So I've given sort of the overview, I guess, of where we're coming from, and I'll now jump into, I guess, a little bit more detail just around some of those programs and hopefully touch on, I guess, the unique sort of partnership or collaborative aspect to it. But I did just want to flag, I guess, that what we do could not be done without the stakeholders that we engage with or that we collaborate with for delivery of our programs. Central to all that we do are partnerships. And it's interesting to say that within government because I think sometimes perhaps people think, and some of the feedback over the last couple of days, collaborating with government is perhaps not an easy thing to do. And I'm here to tell you SV is different, but we probably have our quirks as well. I guess in some respects what enables us to have a slightly different relationship and provide a slightly different offer to industry is that we're not responsible for regulatory activity, nor are we necessarily responsible for policy delivery. We are in a program delivery sense, but we contribute to as opposed to a responsible reporting on or delivery of. Some might refer to us as a checkbook. I like to think of it as an incubator and a funder of purpose, but essentially we can engage with industry because we're looking to design programs that benefit them and help them realise our ambition under the policy as well. It just makes for a much nicer relationship given we have a much more sort of cordial conversations. I'm sure Steve, who's speaking later on, will speak to. But it also provides great insight to us in terms of what industry and our other stakeholders, be that in research, schools, community, elsewhere, require, and enabling us to really, I guess, adjust and revise our pitch and support as required. I will add too, increasingly in recent years, the sort of the funding transactional aspect to our offer has really changed, and we're starting to move into an area where industry in particular don't just want money. They like it, it's great, it's a good incentive, but government support, and we've heard this over the last couple of days, clarity in terms of policy position and longevity have become increasingly more important to government, to industry investments of scale. We're seen as, as still obviously having the carrot of funding as a key incentive, but we're seeing more increasingly it's the relationship and the benefit that we can add to a project from our participation, not just the grant payment itself. So I'll kick off just with one of our key services that we deliver out of the group at the moment is our investment facilitation service. So as the name suggests, aims to facilitate investment within Victoria. We want to remain the place to invest, be that for resource recovery or in activating the circular economy in Australia. Victoria plays a key role in terms of managing a lot of waste streams that find their way down to our port system, but also has a lot of innovation, a lot of big business obviously located within proximity of Victoria as well. So it makes sense for us to retain that and grow that as well. The service is a little bit different to, I guess, some of the other sort of economic development services within government in that it is tailored and essentially bespoke to circular economy as well. So we're working with investors that want to invest in this economy and want to play a role in realising the vision of the policy itself as well. It's great because it's a bit of a concierge service. We've got some material specialists that can take inquiries to the right contacts within government or also look for external funding opportunities as well. So it really is fit for purpose and ensures that it's a seamless experience. It helps navigating some of those fun things like planning, regulatory requirements, and also obviously, engagement with local government who we work quite closely with as well. They do also offer some sort of smaller scale facilitation grants as well, which support with things like business case advisory services and also some data related support as well. So industry and infrastructure development, a key focus of our policy, and I touched on implications of China National Sword before and some of the impacts that we felt down in Victoria from particularly as it relates to our curbside or commingled system. So under the CE policy, we're investing over $77 million into the recycling sector and essentially trying to reinstigate and I guess reinvent the capacity on the ground to ensure that it's not only fit for purpose, but it also is an exemplary service in terms of its regulatory sort of alignment and compliance as well. Under this package, we also acknowledge that there's a step change required too in order to accelerate our economy to a more circular economy as well. So we're also catering for and allowing for remanufacturing opportunities as well. So ensuring that there's offtake markets and processing capability available for products, be that plastics, paper, fibre, otherwise, that can then be reprocessed into goods and services in some cases that can be sold directly into our economy as well. We've also been the benefit of a co-contribution from the Australian government as well under the Recycling Modernisation Fund, leveraging some $40 million into those projects as well, which has just allowed for us to really scale up our impact. Just a couple of projects I wanted to touch on that we've supported in recent times. One is, and it's relevant to recent conversations around plastics in particular, but we're supporting a Melbourne-based company called Martog, who are building a new plastics processing facility that essentially will take a lot of our waste plastics from our commingled facilities and turn them into new food-grade plastic for reuse as well. One of the largest investments we've made to date, but a significant one given the need for us to find more domestic processing applications, but also manufacturing opportunities for our plastics as well. In addition to that, we also have co-funded a project with Visy for a drum pulper that's going to allow us to divert more of the paper and fibre product that was historically exported for processing and manage that onshore domestically for use in Victoria. So moving away from infrastructure and our facilitation side of things, I also wanted to touch on business as well. Obviously, business is essential to a transition to a more circular economy. Going circular can generate businesses a range of benefits as well, be that productivity, reducing waste generation, or increasing reuse and repair within their services. And our Circular Economy Business Innovation Centre, or CBIC, sorry, love an acronym, I had to get one in there somewhere, aims to provide this support and much, much more. So CBIC fosters collaboration between businesses and consultants and government to help really drive I guess the agenda in terms of circular transition, but also it aims to bring people together to develop solutions for industry and ensuring that you've got those networks that foster support and collaboration as well. Thus far, the partnership has spurred industry action around a couple of sectors. So we've developed 4 sector action plans towards circularity, one for food, one for dairy, one for textiles, and also one for toys as well. Which is very relevant in my household with some growing kids and lots of toys to get rid of. So I might take them up on that one too. So CBIC is really focused, I guess, around building industry capabilities and then having that grow within other business sectors as well. It's supported by a virtual hub with a range of resources and tools to help businesses with that transition as well. The virtual centre is supported by a Circular Economy Advisory Committee. I don't have a groovy acronym for that one, but I'm sure we'll come up with one. And this is supported by business leaders and academic leaders as well. There's also some funding available there too under our Circular Economy Innovation Fund and a business circular fund. One example I just wanted to touch on really quickly, perhaps a little too soon for those that maybe partook in the festivities last night, but let's talk about beer. One example of an innovative investment is a first of its kind sort of technology that we're investing in or project that we're investing in with Grainstone. About 70,000 tonne of brewers spent is produced each year in Victoria. And this project is developing an advanced manufacturing site to treat that product and essentially turn it into sort of upgraded, upcycled ingredients for a range of other applications as well. I've got the hurry up here, so I'm going to try and skip through a couple of things so I don't miss too much. So the area that I work most closely in is our market acceleration program, as the name and title suggests. Historically, SV's played quite a critical role in terms of developing and fostering relationships to research new products for our existing recyclables. I do want to acknowledge that for us, our preference is to see those end-of-waste products re-entering the economy at the point at which they initially entered it. But I think we also need to be pragmatic in the sense that for some of those products, it's just not possible at this point in time, and we need to provide support in the interim to allow those products to still play a role in the economy going forward. Our R&D program really focuses on that. It's collaborative partnerships between a research institute or body, but also an industry partner. And a critical component in that is the industry partner. We need to develop R&D that isn't just a great research report, that actually has tangible impact on the ground as well. It also ensures there's a return on investment for government as well. We're spending public dollars and we want to maximise the benefit that we get for that. These partnerships also include amnesty requirements for IP as well, in the sense that IP is developed as a result of the research and development project hopefully in good stead. And the industry partner and the research body come to an arrangement around how they will look to commercialise that product. If they don't, SV retains a right to then access that IP and essentially publish it on the public domain to ensure that that IP doesn't sit gathering dust, but actually can be converted into something of value at a later stage. And again, that's really important. We're talking about taking products into the economy, not talking about having them come into the economy at some stage as well. I guess just quickly on the the evolution of our market acceleration package over time, and comes back to the importance of collaboration and partnerships. We initially started with an investment focus grant type structure. Over time, as we've worked closer with our partners, we've come to the conclusion that we're really great at developing IP and fostering great connections and potential networks for that to grow. Where there's been a bit of and they call it the cliff of death, I think, in the startup world, where there's been a gap is that move to commercialisation and full-scale implementation or manufacturing of a product. And that's where we've tried to step in to really revise our offer to ensure it matches what our stakeholders need. That includes a range of different things under our commercialisation support program, which is essentially taking R&D, successful R&D recipients and giving them further guidance, business coaching, support, right through to giving them services and support for things like LCAs, EPDs, to demonstrate that products can perform and stack up, particularly in comparison to their virgin counterparts as well. Just quickly, one successful example of this partnership model is our RoboVoid project, a partnership between GT Recycling, RoboVoid and Swinburne University. They have developed a technology to print a 3D void former in concrete slabs. Now, this displaces the need for concrete in non-structural applications, provides a range of other benefits from thermal efficiency through to obviously offsetting carbon and the like as well. This project's great. It's actually converted into some stuff in regards to bedroom furniture, but we'll let that evolve before we speak too much about that. But essentially a really successful partnership that's found application beyond its initial intended use of obviously just recycling products, and looking now at better availability and potential in the built sector as well. It's also gone on to receive some additional funding from a federal government CRC, and they're now undertaking further research into its sort of automated manufacturing and design as well. Now, finally, I want to touch on this because there's been a lot of discussion around government hanging its hat on procurement and really driving procurement. And I think it's really important for us to acknowledge that in government, public procurement offers the greatest lever that I think we have to actually enforce and embed policy change. We've done up-to-date studies right across government activities and procurement areas and identified the significant sort of leverage that government can provide for a range of products, and also now are extending that into local government through our Biorecycled service, which is a targeted program that aims to provide behaviour change and tools and support into local government to enable them to establish more sustainable procurement practices. Initially, the focus of this service has really been around having them utilise recycled content, materials and products in both their facility upgrades, landscaping, new greenfield builds, but increasingly it's spreading across to other services and materials as well that local government procure readily. It's brilliant because local government seem to have a little bit more flexibility than state government as it comes to procurement policy, and they're well and truly committed and want to demonstrate back to community what it is they're doing as well. Again, it's a partnership model. We've developed it with local government, a lot of feedback, a lot of surveys, much perhaps to the behest of them at times. But what it's allowed us to do is to evolve our service to match the needs of local government. We're absolutely cognizant that local government are stretched. Competitive time allowances for them to engage and be involved in some of our events, PDs and the like as well. So we've tried to really refine our offer to match their availability, but also perhaps more importantly, the maturity of sustainable procurement within local government as well. There's some that are right at the beginning of their journey. There are some that are leaps and bounds that are teaching us the things that we need to consolidate and disseminate to our broader local governments as well. Lastly, I want to touch on something that's really cool because it's got champions and we've got a roundel, I think they call those things, a little logo there. It's our Biorecycled Champions initiative, which is a cohort of local government officers that have come together to really spread the good word. I almost make them sound like informants, but they are not. They are perhaps enablers of sustainable procurement within local government, aiming to act as a bit of a buddy system to other local governments within their sort of general region, providing support, advice and guidance, but more importantly, testing some of the tools, be those procurement guidance, criteria, products as well. And this is, just kicked off, but really exciting to see the interest and the leverage. And you can see them here all sitting at one of our porous lane R&D project pavement areas, just investigating how well water runs through that pavement. One of the very rare Melbourne sunny days, it appears. I just wanted to finish with one just quick quote, just in regards to competition and collaboration. I came across this some years ago when we were designing or developing one of our R&D programs, and R&D in Australia is a very competitive exclusive field in some respects, where researchers tend to not share a lot of the detail because of that that innovation and commercialisation aspect. One thing we've certainly noted, and I hope has come across in this, is that for us to be successful in implementing a circular economy, it relies so heavily on collaboration. I think just the name circular in itself suggests that we need to work together and close the loop on some of those conversations and opportunities as well. And thanks for your time.
Thanks, Shannon. A real comprehensive canter through all the cool stuff that SV is doing. I would now like to welcome our second speaker, Gavin Hull. Gavin is a principal consultant with Arcadis. He is a seasoned waste and circular economy consultant. He's delivered projects for all levels of government, and he's particularly interested in how we make that transition from waste management really to a circular economy. And fortunately for us, and what he's going to talk about, he's also a materials flow analysis nerd. Gavin.
A nerd, thank you. That's a wonderful introduction. And to be honest though, this does link quite well into how I'm going to sort of put this presentation forward, because materials flow analysis is quite nerdy, it's quite data heavy. And I probably lined myself up for this without much thought when I sort of invented this title, where how am I going to take something which is quite data heavy and quite nerdy and change it into a story that hopefully is going to resonate with the waste management sector, with all those actors in it, whether it be the commercial sector, the local governments, the state governments, things like that. And yeah, so I've lined myself up for this drastic task, really, this daunting task of looking at how you can make waste management more circular and how I can apply an MFA. First off, just to give you an overview, I've managed to sort of take part and lead a couple of MFAs at different scales. One at state scale, I've delivered a organics, timber and tyres MFA for the Queensland Government, tracking organics from basically cropping through to final disposal points. And I'll bring that to you a little bit later, after I've sort of set out the context. I've also done one within New South Wales looking across the Hunter Valley and the Hunter Central Coast region, which had very much a focus on the end of life, on the waste arisings and that data point. So I'll bring that to you in due course. Anyway, I'll take you on a journey now. First of all, though, I just want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Gumbaynggirr community here in Coffs Harbour. And I pay respect to their elders, past, present and emerging. I am a consultant. I work for Arcadis. These are the numbers, lots of people globally, working in mobility, places, resilience. But in the waste space, what do we do there? We offer a broad spectrum of services. I work on the left-hand side there in terms of the advisory, looking at policies, strategies, assessments, and we work all across the value chain there in terms of identifying the requirement for infrastructure, building infrastructure, etc. And I particularly like this picture. I think it highlights everything which is sort of good about waste management and everything which is sort of bad about waste management. I can't tell you where it's taken, but there's some active reuse on the side of that rear end loader. And I think that quite often there's a lot of unsung heroes within the waste sector that no one really pays attention to. But so there's always a double or triple meaning in a picture. So the journey I'm going to take you on, the story I'm going to tell you, and where do we get to MFA? On the start at the end. So the title of my presentation was, how can MFA make the waste management sector more circular? So first off, what's more circular? That's a big question, Gavin. How am I going to answer that? I'm an engineer. I like to sort of think about putting scientific rigor into things. So in doing so, let's use some hypotheses. So I've sort of sprinkled a few hypotheses through this presentation because I want to answer a question. I want you, hopefully, to take a few things away from this presentation. So I'll have to keep reminding myself what that question is rather than just rambling on about what an MFA is and hopefully keep to the point. So the first hypothesis is the waste management can play an important role in the transition to a circular economy. Now, I think we probably all buy into that. That's why we're here, that's why we're in this session. But it made me just think, right, okay, well, what is the context of this? So I dug into the policy, well, the New South Wales policies were in New South Wales, just thinking, how's that framed up? How is circular economy framed up for the waste sector? And there's a strong emphasis here on the recovery of resources, the regenerative approach, but there's sort of, within the policy, there's no real gauge of what's circularity. So how do we measure circularity? Is it a real resource recovery number? Is it a recycling number? And I think that we lose track of actually what are we trying to achieve? And that's the first thing that sort of sprung to mind, and it prompted me to ask 3 questions. That got that out of the bag too quickly. So the first question was, what role does the waste sector have in a circular economy? Now, some of you got ideas on that and thoughts on that. The other one was, what impact can the waste sector have, and how circular can the waste sector be? So I'll look out there for information, and I'm very familiar with the waste hierarchy, reduce, reuse, recycle. Now, there's a lot of transition and movement within this space that's happened over recent years, and some good research that came out of Utrecht University and has reframed that waste hierarchy into, I think, they're numbered R0 to R9, the 10 Rs. And I think this sort of sets out basically where the waste sector can operate. And I think realistically, we're down there at the bottom in that return bit. We're looking at how can we recycle, how can we recover, potentially how can we remine. That's an interesting concept. And we try and influence that consumption bit, but it's basically up to the consumers, the users, the residents, the bit in the middle. And so in that report, they pull together a really interesting diagram, which I love this. It's a really messy flow diagram. Look at that. There's got to be some equations in there as well, isn't there? But what it does is it's sort of, that's technical, right? That's a peer-reviewed article, technical content, and you can if you look closely and with a squint, you can see some butterflies in there, and you can certainly see some circles. But what I try to do is, right, I've got to focus, Gavin, let's not talk about the wider circular economy, let's talk about waste, right? The waste management sector, what we do in the waste management sector, right? Keep thinking about that, and how can MFA benefit that? So there's my scope of reference. That's where I'm working in. I'm not working up further up the chain. I'm going to try and sort of bring us back into that picture. So that's circularity. I've got an idea where the waste sector sits within that circularity sort of context. But I purposely didn't use the word circular economy in my presentation title, because I think that is a big concept. But we need to sort of look at what does the economic bit of a circular economy mean. And I think that we often sort of neglect that all those economic principles and ideas that are out there, it's all about the value, the economic value within that. And how the system works is another thing. And so I dug a little bit deeper, thinking, right, where's the evidence base that's going to sort of give me some ideas about what the economic bit of a circular economy is? And I'm just sort of up here going to talk to you about MFA. There's lots of thinking out there, lots of really intelligent people, and lots of them on the panel today who can fill in some of the gaps to you. I sort of went out a quick look, and you just think, actually, there's really good points of reference when you look at the CSIRO's paper on the export bans, in effect, and how that stimulated the market. The waste sector has responded to those bans, and in that report, they've talked about market development, right? It's a nice circular diagram in here. They also sort of, I suppose it's written very small in the middle under circular economy, materials flow, and I thought that's a great hook, I'll use that. And where my thinking went there, so that's fine, okay, it's markets, there's got to be some value in it. Who's done some studies on the value? And coming from sort of Queensland, I do know that QTC have done some studies looking at what is the net value to the Queensland economy through taking circular economy action. That's not to say they directly have taken action, but they've modelled it and looked at it. And there's billions of dollars in the system, right, where you can derive greater value. And so this is, had a bit of a dig. So a couple of the big four have produced some reports and added some numbers in there, and yeah, we're talking billions. It depends on your point of reference, but there's a lot of value, a lot of opportunity, a lot of potential that exists in the market. So maybe that's where the waste management sector can add value and add circularity. So there's me digging around. Keeping on point though, back to what's the next hypothesis, Gavin? So I've worked in the waste sector for a while. I've listened to lots of talks, lots of conjecture about where we've come from, where we're going to, and I sort of thought, well, let's frame that up and just see where can we apply a data perspective to that. And I think that the waste sector is basically transitioning from being a solutions sector to more of an opportunities sort of agent. And look, a very simplified diagram. Waste management came from the need to protect public health. In doing so, the waste collections, the way we manage waste, it then turned into something where we're looking at managing the environmental impact and then controlling the environmental measures. And I think we're now sort of in that cost reduction cycle where it's how can we deliver value to the ratepayers, for instance, in delivering these services. And we've sort of forgotten about the public health bit and the environmental impact. And I think, though, the last bastion really for where circularity comes in is how do you increase the value? How do you derive value from the processes we're delivered? and move from that cost reduction to the increased value part. Look, part of this is conjecture, but so I looked outside and, I lean on the shoulders of others, and good report this about the state of circularity in Australia, because I want to reflect on what's that done in the waste sector. And I've just picked out a couple of chapters. So you can see this is delivered by loads of reputable consultants, none of which are me, but I like to sort of reference good work. And there are two sections in this. One is the visualising Australia's circular economy opportunities. That's just a bit of a bookmark from my perspective, and I can't, for the life of me, read what those are. But a couple of keywords on there: ecosystem mapping, shining spotlight on local initiatives, and create intentional movement forward. Right, so it's catalysing, visualising to inform and catalysing. The next one is, I just like the diagrams, to be honest with you. I thought they were great diagrams. I love a diagram. And so this one was about maximising the opportunity to deliver value within circular systems. So these are my two bookmarks. I like these. This is where I'm going to base my presentation, and this is effectively where my presentation starts. So all that is just preamble. And we're now going to talk about what an MFA is. So materials flow analysis. Okay, so frame up, Gavin. Frame up. Focus on point. Hypothesis number 3, materials flow analysis can help identify opportunities and value propositions for the waste management sector. That's what I think. That's what I think we can answer with materials flow analysis, and I think that's where we can stick numbers into the opportunities, and we can try and build a new market and a new way of doing things. Put up a couple of examples here. A lot of spreadsheet work got done to derive that bottom one, and that's an organics material flow for Queensland. And the top one is a Power BI dashboard that sits on top of the Hunter and Central Coast version. Lots of different sheets on that, but there's stuff that's been done. I'm just trying to validate my experience here for you. But what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to sort of talk you through what is an MFA. Why isn't this playing? Who's a techie person? There's no sound to this. This is just an idea of how you build up an MFA. There's loads of layers, loads of strata involved in this. And we talk about the value chain, the complexity of the value chain, where things are generated, and then how they move to the end of life. So the fancy diagram that sorts all that out. We also talk about materials, like how do we categorise materials, places where stuff generated. And then the fourth dimension that I've dealt with here is like sector, so who's generating, where it's generated. I'll just sort of leave it parked on that space for a moment. That materials flow analysis is in effect an inventory of all of those flows, of where materials start, where they finish, and some characteristics in and around those materials. And part of the difficulty with MFA is how you characterise all of those flows. I've tried to simplify this a lot, and I sort of tried to manage it. If you frame it up in terms of the which stage of the value chain, hopefully we're all familiar with that. I'll try to sort of demonstrate what that is. The who, so who's generating the materials, where it's being generated, what it is, and sometimes that can change across that. Obviously, sort of crops change into products, change into a waste type, and then how much of that. And it's unravelling that mix of where stuff goes is the task at hand, and that's the bit that really reveals what's in the system and how the system's functioning and the scale at each of the stages within the system. This is another example. I'm just going to trot over this. This is how we built up the one in the Hunter and Central Coast region. So it was very focused on the end-of-life waste sector, and we had to take top-down data, so state-based data, local data, wrangle it all up as we do, categorise it, itemise it, build it into an inventory, and then report out And we've got quite a lot of tools that sit there, and the Hunter have taken that on and used it within some of their strategic thinking around circular economy in the region. And we had the privilege and opportunity of taking that that Hunter and Central Coast MFA and applying it for one council, for Maitland City Council. Because quite often the MFAs are best delivered at either that state or regional level, where there's aggregated mass of data, and you're able to sort of dive in and give some insights. Now, they had a particular focus on how they should optimise or use their site. How should they plan that for the future? What should be the focus on that? How should they manage certain materials? And it allowed them, and we guided them through this process, to look at what the materials were that they needed to manage. So what were they holding? What was the wider opportunity? So what was being generated by the other councils and what volumes they were in? Did that offer them commercial opportunity to adjust the way they operate their sites, introduce new technologies, or phase them in? And it really sort of gave them, when they had that specific lens, they could use the data, dive into the data to really explore where those opportunities are. And we did a couple of little focus studies on particular material streams or particular sectors that were generating particular material streams, the likes of C&D wastes and the materials within C&D wastes, and really extrapolated what the opportunities could be and when we could build those out. So that's like a worked example of how a council can fundamentally benefit from that detailed data analysis. Flipping it on the other side, at a state level, what benefits can be derived at the state level? Now, I sort of went through the process of trying to identify I just sort of highlighted the waste section within this MFA context that I did in Queensland. But we profiled it across all of it. So it's like, how does state development get involved in infrastructure planning and policy guidance to meet the current demand for materials and the synergies that happen between different actors in that cycle. But in the waste side of it, this is where we pulled it down to that we're able to sort of quantify all of those threads coming in. So the waste sector, in terms of, if you think, just put your head in FOGO, we're in that recovery or final disposal. We just go from the use. And so we just monitor, we're just looking at what's that one line. If you're then looking at what's all of those lines coming in, all of a sudden you might have a 10,000 tonne problem turning into a 100,000 tonne opportunity. That's a different game. That's a different gameplay. It's a different scale of value, and it's a different commercial venture. So it does shine a completely different perspective on it when you can take into account all of those other variables. I'll move on to the last. How long have I got? 1 minute. Brilliant. Right. Last slide or penultimate slide. So, how can MFA help waste management become more circular? Sort of back into the end of the presentation or the start of it. I think it comes down to two things. So obviously it's data heavy, but it provides both opportunity and value. I think the opportunities is quantification and scale. It's an opportunity to identify the synergies that could exist and happen. And I'm really sort of pleased to hear, one of the panels the other day where Woolworths are looking to explore how they can address their food waste problems in collaboration with local governments in the regions to build volume and build capacity. It also allows you to look at targeted actions, specific materials or groups of materials. How can we deal with them? Are they problematic? And it gives you the opportunity to look at ecosystem functionality, not the fragility in it. So how do you build a more robust system? If you can build it at scale or manage all the throughputs, how can it be functional? And then value is really the outcomes. It's like it is about deriving more value from those materials. Whether it be end product or byproduct or carbon offsetting, or you can dive right into it, and it does allow you to put forward underlying business cases for investment and for qualifying the level of investment needed. Right, and I'll leave it there. Just to sort of leave you with the thought that one of the best quotes I've ever had from a client once is that I worked on a circularity calculator for Sydney Water, And we were trying to work out what is circularity. And the client said, well, what we need to do is we've got to find out what is our 2 degree story. You know, climate change has developed into that story. That's the hook that everyone's got. It's a 2 degree story. And he said, that's where we want to get to with circular economy. I haven't got the answer to that, but that was just a brilliant question that the client came forward with. Anyway, I'll move over. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Gavin. I told you he was a nerd. It's a compliment. Steve Morris is up next. He's the founder of Close the Loop and has spent more than 20 years developing and implementing product stewardship schemes. An early pioneer of the circular economy, Steve's going to talk to us about recovering and reusing complex material waste streams. Steve.
That sounds really nerdy, but I'm the last thing from a nerd that you'll get. But I do know a little bit of maths. 3 times 20 plus 10 minutes for question and answers does not go into how much time we've got left for lunch. So I'm going to collaborate with you, Claire, and push through this pretty quickly. There's quite a, if I can get slide 1 up, a bit of change at Close the Loop. We've started from a single idea in a small factory in Thomastown in Victoria 23 years ago and have grown quite rapidly and most recently merged with one of Australia's more circular packaging companies, a group called OFPack. And thankfully for me, as founder of Close the Loop, kept the name Close the Loop Group, even though it now includes many divisions. That slide there shows you some of the divisions that are now part of our group. We listed on the stock exchange at the end of 21, were IPO of the year in 22, and the share price is pretty strong. So if you want to back circularity transition in this country, CLG is the ticker. Just keep a look at it anyway. It's really, really interesting. So my objective here is to share part of our journey in lovely, bright pictures. We've all been out recently, so perhaps just a few pictures and a bit of fun and banter as we go along will be the order of the day. Some of these depict our journey. The one with Costa there was last year. Gratefully, we were a recipient of one of the first ever Circular Economy Awards for Australia at the from the Australian Circular Economy Hub, which was at Circularity 22. This year I'm lucky enough to be on the steering committee for Circularity 23 in Melbourne, which is a brilliant event. Ryan's here from Planet Ark. G'day, mate. And a thing about Planet Ark as well is the lovely Lane Beachley there, who has been the champion talent or personality behind cartridges for Planet Ark, which is not only an excellent example of collaboration where Planet Ark and Close the Loop have collaborated for more than, almost 20 years on that one particular program. It is probably the most successful voluntary product stewardship program in Australia, and it's a bit of a BP, quiet achiever in a lot of ways. Doesn't seem to make too many slides on the subject of product stewardship, but we're very proud that we're well in advance of 50 million cartridges, and I can tell you not one of them was designed with the end in mind. So it's a very complex waste stream, which I'll talk about now. So I love talking about the circular economy because now I'm a worker bee in a big group, and we've got a group CEO, Joe Foster, who is far more diplomatic and polished than I am. My role is, and I chose it, Head of Circular Economy for the Close the Loop group. 15 companies now. We can't have 15 founders, can we? That would be a little bit confusing. So I'm the circular economy guy because it's my passion. Now, there are 3 aspects to the circular economy. 2 are pretty well talked about, but the middle one is talked about more than any. But the first one is design. It all begins and ends with good design. And just talk to poor old people at RedCycle. If packaging was designed better, there would have been more people to recycle that packaging in Australia, and there would not have been the extremely sad case of people losing jobs and maybe more. I can talk about that all day because Close the Loop was the largest recycler of RedCycle material, full stop. Unfortunately, we had a fire in our facility, and contributed, I'm sure, to part of the red cycle demise. And, I'm very sad about that. But design is so very important. Then the second pillar of circularity, keeping products in circulation for as long as possible, and we've talked about all the ways we can do that through this conference. But if you can't keep the product in circulation, like a toner cartridge that hasn't been designed to be remanufactured, for example, then you keep the atoms and molecules. You'll keep those raw materials in circulation for as long as you can. And the final one, dear to my heart, is regeneration. Not many people are talking about it, and I think it's because the scope is so small. Regenerate natural systems. You might think, you're an idiot. How could that be a small scope? I'm all for planting trees. Tree Day, I've been involved numerous times. Planting mangroves, absolutely. Let's build soil health, regen ag. Passionate about all of that. But why not expand the scope of regeneration to include regenerating people's careers? Regenerating raw materials. Why isn't the guy who was talking about getting wood waste back into building materials, why isn't that classified as regenerative? Because we're having to chop down less trees. And what we do, for example, with our Tonoplast product is regenerative because we're needing to use less bitumen, which is a non-renewable resource, right? So I'm all about expanding the scope of regeneration. If you're on that journey, give me a call or let's talk because it's happening. Now, something a little closer to home, we're talking about materials. This is a product called eWood, and this was invented by my good self so many years ago, it's not funny. The fence, the retaining wall and the steps were built around 20 years ago. That's my house. They were built a long time ago. This table I built about 10 years ago. They haven't changed one molecule. So there's no microplastics, there's no deterioration. It's just built in character over that period of time. So this was the start of my journey towards materials science. I'm not a scientist. Maybe I was in a past life, but I'm certainly not in this life. But I am passionate, an inventor, and have patented a few things as well, including this one, which is Tonoplast. I was naive enough to start Close the Loop all that time ago with the brand promise, zero waste to landfill. Now, 23 years ago, calling a company Close the Loop and then staking a claim for zero waste to landfill, now that, in Paul Klemenko, the ex-CEO of Planet Ark's eyes, was stupid. But we did it, and we've done it to this day. Not 1 kilogram of the materials that enter our facility go to landfill. We do use some waste to energy because it's better than landfill. This one's a really interesting one because we've developed the product from waste toner powder that cannot be reused in a toner cartridge, but it has a very small particle size, a very low melt temperature, and it's abundant in the world, particularly if you're the largest collector and recycler of imaging supplies in the world. Now we've got a division, since 2007. We've had a very fast-growing division in Kentucky in the US, and we're also in Belgium doing what we do, what started here in Australia. This particular product improves the performance of a road. So I don't even talk about the environmental aspects of it because most of my life is spent talking to road engineers or procurement people who are concerned about their budget, not what the hippie in sustainability's got to say. You know, they're very much interested in the fact that Tonoplast, when added to a road, improves its deformation resistance, improves its fatigue life, which directly corresponds to longer lifed asset. So 15 years extra on a road that's built with Tonoplast. It's extra resilience to water. And the fact that polymers have been used in roads for 50 years. But all the song and dancing is around recycled polymers, and they must be generating microplastics. It must be downcycling. There must be leachate issues. Scientifically, no, and no. It is actually that good. But sticking to my promise to keep moving quickly, there's a lot going on in terms of microplastics and leachate. I told you about that. Here's a really exciting one, standards. We talked earlier, what are the barriers for our transition to circularity? Well, one barrier that we face is the lack of uniform standards and specifications. In fact, specifications that are blocking the use of new materials of recycled content in infrastructure projects. Blocking it because they are prescriptive. They will tell you not only what needs to go into that road, at what proportions, but where you're going to get those raw materials from. And that's state roads I'm talking about. Council roads are a little bit more lenient, which is why we've laid over 1,000 kilometres of roads in Australia using Tonoplast, and some very, very big numbers of mixed and contaminated plastics that have no other life. They cannot go back into packaging because they were never designed to go back into packaging. When you've got 3 different polymers in the same film, there's no way that's going to go back into packaging again. So these technologies are very, very important. Materials circularity, materials mapping. There is some very good news, some good progress. Ellen MacArthur Foundation have created this material circularity indicator, which we're using to get ISC Infrastructure Sustainability Council points for material circularity. Now that's hard to do in a road. And they're talking innovation points, so it's not business as usual. It's not recycled asphalt, but it's things like Tonoplast. Some really good progress, and we get really good scores on material circularity when using Tonoplast because it extends the life of the asset for 15%, so an extra 3 years. So over the life of the asset per annum, you get a lower carbon footprint and better material circularity. Here, I've got a couple of diagrams, Gav, not as good as yours, but they just kind of show the progression of, that's red cycle material getting loaded into the truck. This is a diagram of our new plant. We, since the fire, we've designed and we're about to build the very first commercial scale mix melter in Australia. It's Australian IP, invented by a Victorian farmer, and being built in Wollongong by a very highly credentialed engineering firm that we've worked with for over 20 years. It produces both Tonoplast and Arflex, which are existing products of ours. We've just learnt from the last line how to improve it and put it on steroids. Still not really steroids, it's only 5,000 tonnes a year, but that's 4 times more than we were producing before. This has been a 10-year overnight success, and we've had to learn every step of the way how to do this. We are working with CHEP to use the finished product in a shipping pallet platform. We're working with Coles. We've got 20% Arflex in that supercart shopping trolley. This is real. It's happening today, and it's made from waste that would otherwise have gone to landfill. And then, of course, up the top, we've got our Tonoplast product. These are flow charts, if you like, just showing, I think I've talked you through how the toner and the soft plastics get into Tonoplast, which is then used by the asphalt plant. We ship 1-tonne bags or 700 kilo bags of Tonoplast all over the country, and it goes into the asphalt plants to make these high quality roads. Then we've got, and I'm not sure where I need to be pointing this, but I'm not doing a very good job. Arflex is an injection moulding grade of plastic from the same material. This is the plant I've been talking about, and it is a mix melter. So it's a drum in the middle with perforations in the drum and hydraulic rams that push bales of mixed soft plastics into the drum. At the interface of that bale and the drum, friction is created, which melts the plastic under its own frictional heat. The material drops through the bottom and into a twin screw extruder. And that twin screw extruder can then be a compounding extruder, which means we can add herbs and spices to get various properties of the finished product. So if we need impact strength for a shipping pallet, we can add that, at that twin screw extruder stage. If we need high melt flow, because we're going to injection mould a, curbside recycling bin, then we can do that modification at that twin screw extruder stage. Very exciting technology. Keep an eye on it, 5 to go, and I guarantee I'll do it in 3. We're going to duplicate that system all over the country. Why? Unlike chemical recycling, which is basically, must be sponsored by the trucking industry, I gather, but unlike that, we're interested in putting the solution where the waste is, using local jobs to create local products of value like Tonoplast. Cosmetics, we're big into cosmetics. We were recipients of some federal government funding to put together a product stewardship program for cosmetics in this country. Talk to anyone about that all day long. And this one, again, is about circular contracts. Now, not again, but this is about circular contracts. I may have spoken to you guys about it. The City of Greater Bendigo and Close the Loop have signed a contract, which I believe is a game changer. I think it's going to be copied and blissfully copied by other councils, because Bendigo have put their bum on the line and said, we will buy back in proportion to what we divert from landfill. In this case, baled soft plastics being diverted from landfill, sent to us, we turn it into tonoplast, and they buy back the equivalent tonnage for tonoplast to go into local roads. That's all done and dusted, and as soon as our plant is operational again, which will be towards the end of this year, we've rebuilt some of the lines, but this one is taking a lot longer because it's so never been done before. Regenerate, I said before about what my beliefs and feelings are about regeneration, so I'm going to leave it there. Thank you all so much. Look forward to a few questions and answers.
Thank you, Steve, and double bonus points for getting us back on time. Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Jenny Macklin. She's a senior researcher at BehaviourWorks. What Jenny doesn't know about behaviour change and social science isn't worth knowing. She's a specialist in applying this knowledge to consumption, waste prevention, and recycling behaviours, all absolutely critical. Jenny.
Thanks, Claire. It's really exciting to be here to be able to share some of the recent really exciting work that we've done. So I started working behaviour change in recycling, moving into that waste prevention and consumption space. Gavin put a really great map up of the whole system around circular economy. And what we're really trying to do, work with our partners, is working out how do you push into the rest of that aspect, further up the hierarchy into that broader part of circular economy. And we've been trying to do this for a while to work out where to prioritise, and have recently been really privileged to be sponsored to do some really exciting research to actually start to answer that question, where do we intervene? So BehaviourWorks is a behavioural science research centre at Monash University. We do individual projects, we do a lot of education and training, but we're also really privileged to have some of our work supported by a consortium across some of Australia's key federal and state government agencies, environment agencies, which actually allows us to undertake some major collaborative research programs at a scale that wouldn't be possible for individual partners. And so one of them was our Responsible Consumption Mission 3-year piece of work, saying how could we apply behavioural science to understand how we can reduce irresponsible consumption, increase circular consumption to reduce Australia's material footprint. And this was a really major program of work. It started off by trying to take that massive challenge of circular consumption and material footprint and narrow it down to a challenge that we could apply behavioural science to understand how we could get some behaviour change towards that journey. And we worked with over 100 stakeholders to identify over 470 different behaviours that contribute to circular consumption across a whole range of audiences in our production and consumption systems. And we narrowed that down to understand that purchasing second-hand is a really impactful and feasible place to start operating in the circular economy. We heard from Oma this morning about the scope that already exists, the networks, the infrastructure, the amount that's happening, and the ability to mainstream that. And we worked with Salvos to actually evaluate this idea of uplifting, transforming the second-hand purchasing experience as a way of mainstreaming it, and really exciting to see the benefit that second-hand retailers can add to that behaviour change experience. But what we realised as looking at that is that in one sense, reuse is maybe not as mainstream as we would like, but it is established. We kind of do know how to do it, and we just need to get better at that behaviour change component. But it actually only really addresses just one very small part of this major challenge that we face. So what we actually wanted to do was go back to the beginning and look at that whole range of behaviours and say, if we actually looked at these together, we didn't just try and narrow it down, we actually looked at them in relationship with each other. What could that tell us about where we need to be moving towards, the new things that we need to be doing in order to bring about this change? And so we actually applied behavioural systems mapping to develop, to work out where to intervene and prioritise this roadmap to circular consumption. So we started by having to define, what are those behaviours that we're trying to get. As I said, we did have behaviours across all of the different stakeholders, but we looked at those and we said, well, what represents the ultimate circular consumption behaviours? And we found these 8 behaviours, which very interestingly and comfortingly match up very closely to the key core waste prevention activities in the new waste prevention framework that we did for the federal government. So it's always really great when you do 2 pieces of research and they replicate, that they actually find the same answer. But it's not surprising, because waste prevention really is this key part of the circular economy. But so we came up with these 8 ultimate circular consumption behaviours, what we need consumers to be doing to reduce our material footprint. And underneath these, I won't go into too detail, but there's a huge amount of specificity underneath. If we're looking at repair, obviously households can be doing DIY repair, they can go to repair cafes, they can get third-party paid services, obviously under warranty. But there's also organisational consumers, our commercial industrial construction businesses, our government agencies, our civil society organisations. And collectively, obviously, these organisations consume way more than households. One of the things that was really interesting about our stakeholder engagement process was that we kept coming back to household consumption. That's what everybody knew about, that's what everybody was sort of looking at and interested in. But actually, what this really highlighted is that we don't know enough about the role that organisations play, their consumption role. We're very good at understanding their production and supply and enablement role, but actually we have this massive gap. We need to understand what is the circular consumption role for organisations if we really want to reduce our material footprint. So we get some little insights from this work, but it's a major gap that we need to improve on in the next phase. So once we have these behaviours, what we want to do is link them together and just do a really high-level example of this to show, what we mean and why this approach to behavioural system mapping is really exciting for us. So these are our 8 behaviours, and what we want to say is, well, how do they relate to each other? If we want to know what of these behaviours do we want to focus on. So if we have something like making do with less, we want consumers to buy less products. We know that means they need to keep using the products that they have. In order to keep using those products for a long time, they need to have actually bought products that are going to last a long time. They're also going to need to repair those products to keep them working over their life. If they want to repair them, they need to make sure that they actually bought products that were repairable in the first place. So what we're beginning to see is that if we want people to be avoiding less, to be buying less, we actually are depending on other behaviours that we need them to be doing first. Similarly, for buying second-hand, which was where we ended up with at the beginning part of our responsible consumption, no surprises. If people are going to be able to get second-hand, we need people to be passing items on, whether that's directly through peer-to-peer sales or donating to charity shops to be resold, or even returning to retailers to be refurbished. For people to be able to pass them on, obviously, again, they need to be built to last. They need to maintain value over multiple owners over an extended lifetime. But interestingly, buying second-hand is also necessary to actually ensure that people do pass on. You can't sell something online if somebody is not going to buy it. Op shops stop taking donations for items for which there is no demand. So there's this reverse relationship there. And so what we begin to do is just to build up this very beginning of a kind of behavioural system map to understand how these behaviours relate to each other. And what we can do is actually apply systems thinking principles to say, well, what does that tell us about where we should intervene? And so one of the principles is that in a system, when you have an element that's dependent on lots of other parts of the system, it can be really challenging and resistant to change. So it's often not a good place to start. So if we take out those behaviours that are dependent on other parts of the system, we're kind of left with 3 options. A second principle is that elements that actually influence major parts of the system can actually really speed up the overall systems transformation. So for example, we can see that buying items built to last has a strong influence all the way around to the rest of our behaviours in this system, a really great place to start. But we can also see a couple of other behaviours here that are sort of floating. They're not really linked. Buying items made from circular materials is absolutely fundamental to making our recycling system work. And I believe, as we've heard, that recycling really is the bedrock of our current system. It is going to be a really important part of the transition to a circular economy, and it's going to stay relevant in a circular economy. But keeping materials in use doesn't have the same impact that keeping products in use does. Something like borrowing or renting, where the retailers maintain ownership of an item, actually incentivises both the retailer and the consumer to preserve the life and the value of that item. And it is one of those, so it's one of those behaviours that is accessible, but also it really pushes the boundaries because it asks people to change the way that they relate to items. We heard in one of the previous sessions that we are so in the process now of buying stuff. So actually focusing on borrowing and renting not only is potentially a bit of a low-hanging fruit, but it is also itself transformational, because in achieving that, you're actually changing the culture of consumption, which is going to have a flow through to many other parts of the system. So I won't go into the detail, but you can break these down into the different parts of their behaviours. So we can say what's really important at the moment could be really encouraging borrowing from commercial and community providers, both as households and also as organisations, and really looking at buying durable, flexible and repairable items. Now, I said that these are behaviours that aren't dependent on other parts of the consumer system, but I'm sure many of you, all of you, are looking at it and saying, well, they're definitely dependent on other parts of the upstream system, and it's true. In order to borrow items, you need to actually have retailers lending items, having those sorts of business models. In order to buy built to last, you need to have producers making products built to last. But we know that borrowing and renting, like purchasing second-hand, is actually a relatively established practice in certain sectors, in certain product categories. So it is a behaviour that is there. It is something that we can work towards now. So it really is a low-hanging fruit that could actually provide some of that greater systems transformation. But making products built to last is not currently it's still a very niche space in terms of businesses building their business model around products that last. And so we really need to look upstream for that. And I am racing through this whole presentation in slow-mo, is available online, but I do want us to finish and have time for questions. But so we looked across all of the actors. These are all the actors that came up in our 470 different behaviours. And when we often look at them, it's really kind of tempting to sort of apply a bit of a linear causal thinking that, okay, if we want to repair an item, for example, we need to buy that repairable item, which means someone needs to sell the repairable item, which means it needs to be made repairable and designed repairable. That's all true. It's absolutely fundamental. But we can go and look at this a little bit more detail. I won't walk you through this entirely, but we can start to add into the system our specific behaviours. With DIY repair, you need to have skills, so you need to have people providing those skills. You probably need to have funding to get those training off the ground. You need consumers to be able to get the tools and parts, so producers need to make those parts available. They also need to honour their warranties to allow repair to happen outside their own protected space. That probably requires government intervention at this stage in right to repair. Doing those kinds of things around right to repair also then actually helps third-party providers provide services, because they are now able to get access to the tools and parts that are needed to do that. And so what you can see is we're just slowly building up the connections across the system. How do different behaviours by different actors actually contribute to what we want? If I was to walk through this all slowly, it would make a lot of sense, I'm sure, to everyone who knows this repair space. But one of the things with system mapping is when you get to the end, you do end up with some rather complex maps. They can be quite daunting to see the output of systems mapping, to have all of the elements there. And often people get to this stage, a really great nerdy exercise to see how it all relates, and say, well, what do we do with this? How do we make use of all this complex information? And that's where taking the next step to actually apply the systems thinking principles to start to break this down. And once you get to this stage, it can be difficult to do visually, as we just did in the consumer stage. So we've put all of these behaviours into a sort of a systems tool. And this is the preliminary sort of behavioural system map for circular consumption. You don't need to read it. It is online for those people who do like to delve into the detail. It is still a little bit linear. We do have our consumption on the right. You can work backwards through the retailers, producers, designers. But it's not because our connections go left to right, they go right to left, they go up and down. So we've really started to build those linkages between the different behaviours. And online, for those of you who like, you can go into the detail of any of these. You can focus down and say, just show me repair. I want to see all the things that repair supports and requires. And you can see the connections, So this is 2 connections away from repair. This is 3 connections away from consumers repairing items. So you can see how it links throughout the system. And you can look at this and visually and say, okay, if we want consumers to repair, we could focus at this repair level and say, well, what do we need to do upstream in order to make repair more viable, such as, for example, right to repair. Or you could see that it is so heavily linked into consumers buying items that are repairable, and therefore maybe focus on making sure that items are put on the market to be repairable. But with so many connections and elements, we want to do more than just sort of visually look at this system. So we can actually use sort of quantitative analysis tools that actually run analysis to understand, for example, one of them is the system influence. Where in this system could you intervene to influence more of the system? So obviously right to repair will enable repair. Repair does enable you to keep using longer, which means that you can avoid buying new products. So that sounds like a really great place. But when we ran the systems, the analysis on this, what was really interesting was we have a whole range of retailer, producer, designer actions. We have a huge range of government interventions in terms of funding, in terms of policy, in terms of support. We have civil society and community sector in this map. And when we ran this analysis to say where has the most influence over the system, one single behaviour came up higher by a substantial margin than any other behaviour or action in this system. And it's really interesting that it was governments mandating minimum design standards for products. So this is over governments mandating right to repair. This is over government procurement in terms of its flow through to changing the whole system. So governments mandating minimum standards, and it's partly because one of our things around our production and retail systems is we're locked in a bit of chicken and egg. Consumers can't get access to these products that they want, but because they're not mainstream, there's not a lot of demand. A lot of consumers aren't out there demanding these products, and businesses know that. So we're locked in this make cheap, sell cheap, buy cheap thing. And there's no obvious way in the current system as we're looking at that for that to change without this kind of external regulatory focus. But so by mandating minimum design standards, not only does this mean people can buy things that are built to last that are repairable, I mean, we're talking things like expected lifetimes for products, basic repairability, replacements of batteries, key components, some of those basic standards. Lets people buy items that are going to last, lets them keep using them, pass them on, get them second-hand and not have to keep buying new stuff. But not only does it then influence all the consumers, when you mandate minimum design standards, that actually influences obviously what the durability and repairability of what producers do, but it actually changes the services and the other opportunities that they provide along with that. So it actually influences so much more of the system than just getting durable products on the market. So you can see as we start to expand, this is just 3 connections from minimum design standards. It's got 7 of the 8 behaviours implicated in this space. So I'll qualify that by saying this map is not complete. There's a few things that are missing. One of them is really understanding where the pull-through impacts come from more organisational procurement. That is not highly represented in the map because, as I said, we didn't have a strong focus on organisational consumer behaviours. We need to get those in here. We also don't have a clear view of the spillover in terms of when producers or retailers do one type of action, which type of actions make them more likely to do other actions, and we don't have that real depth of all of our different behaviours. So there's some more work that we would really like to do. But in doing that, it could change the conclusions about where to intervene. It won't make minimum design standards any less influential, that stays true. It may highlight other things. I imagine it would highlight procurement as an important pull through into the system. So, the two things that we can come out of this roadmap, this preliminary analysis, is focusing sort of low-hanging fruit behaviour change efforts on getting people to borrow instead of buy, and working with and advocating to government around minimum design standards. So we're looking to publish this preliminary roadmap at the end of June to share the actual recommendations, but also the map that everybody can then go and play themselves with. And we're actually looking at the moment currently to build the collaboration to be able to do the next phase, to go that next level in our system mapping work, looking to find people to partner with us to be able to take this to the next point. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Jenny. I've seen that presentation, I think, twice now, and it's just so interesting. I love it. Homestretch, last speaker, Hayley, who apparently is just a massive overachiever. She wears about 7 different hats, including the CEO of the Supply Chain Sustainability School Limited and the chair of the ACE Hub Circular Procurement Working Group. She's got a wealth of experience in governance, strategic management, and marketing, just to name a few. Hayley.
Thank you, and I'm going to get everyone to indulge me for a session a bit at the start here, because I know that I'm holding you back from lunch and that it's the last day of the conference, so we're going to work with there. Before I get going, I would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we're all meeting on, the Gumbaynggirr people, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and also pass on that respect to all people who identify as Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander with us today. Okay, so here we go. Everybody stand up. Shake your arms, twinkle your toes, if you can still feel them. Awesome. Take a deep breath in and exhale. And imagine that this room is half full of water. Everybody has acknowledged there's a problem. Exporters were up the back scooping water into the hall, but they were cut off because it was poor quality. One group of chairs, has split the elements into hydrogen, oxygen and compostable sludge, and they've established an economically viable, high-value business model. There's a bucket and service operating. Ooh, can I get the screen? Thank you. Providing durable, repairable water capture and storage vessels. Their owners, Liza and Henry, are in the corner arguing about how to fix a hole in one of their buckets. A group is working on resiliency with floating chairs. Engineers have converted water into high-strength building materials and have engaged and engineered an island. A couple of people have used the water for steam energy generation. There's also a group of people spruiking the solution just to dig a hole and bury the water there. There was a recycler converting the water into to potable drinking water. A few people were picking up the water and dropping it over in the corner, and then a separate team of people were going over and then picking it up from the corner and then taking it to a treatment centre. But they had an accident. A crew of helpers gathering the water had to put the stockpile back into the pool, and most of the people outraged weren't even in the group collecting the water to drop off to begin with. So I don't know why there wasn't just more treatment centres for that water to start off with. But then someone from procurement entered the room. They turned the tap off and started working with the enterprises in the room to buy their goods and services. Exhale. And that is why I think procurement's really important for when we talk about the circular economy and waste. So please, you can all sit down now, and hopefully that has reinvigorated you for this session as we walk back into the room. And it's one of my favourite ways of sort of storytelling to get everybody in the room for why do I think procurement is really essential when we're talking about circular economy and why we're talking about different things in the waste services industry. So basically, why I love procurement, why I don't know why anyway, nerd. So I think procurement's positioned to have the most significant circularity impact because it is right up the top of that waste hierarchy and the extended waste hierarchy. And for that, that's why I sort of do a lot in this space in order to try and get it through. But where I've come to that conclusion is based on a lot of experience. So I do wear many hats. This is full disclosure. I wear a lot of different hats. My day job is I work 4 days a week with the school. I educate people on all things sustainability from the what level of education through to the Nerdville level of education. I do work with Planet Ark's ACE Hub in working with their procurement working group. I'm also a director of Responsible Steel, which is a steel stewardship issue. We're just trying to, decarbonise the steel industry around the world, something just for the weekend. I do work with the Materials Embodied Carbon Leaders Alliance, which is a WWF group of organisation really trying to decarbonise the amount of embodied carbon that goes into the construction industry. I work with the Property Council of Australia. They have modern slavery and circular economy working groups, so they're trying to work through the whole property services end of things. In my spare time, I'm a scout leader, so I try and train kids up to do the right things and the best end out of it. And also on the side, I do a lot of stuff just personally. So, I have a lot of other interests, but I'm blessed that I have a job that lets me work 4 days a week and get paid and then spend the rest of my time to volunteer and do things on the side to be able to work through things. But this has also enabled me to see things very clearly through the entire supply chain. So yes, I work with procurement. I also work with sales and marketing. Yes, I work with people from operations and from their executive and board departments. And so really sort of seeing a lot of these problems emerge from organisationally, from start to finish and around about different ways through organisations, but also across industries. So I've worked in manufacturing, worked in construction, working with the different pharmaceutical industries and different retail services and hospitality and hospitals and everything else as it goes about. And so one of the lucky things that I get to do as part of my job with the school is that we collaborate to develop those educational platforms and solutions for people. So if you're interested in some free education, jump online, create yourself a free account and learn what's there. If you've got ideas for what's more to come, please send them through to me because this is sort of what we do. And we collaborate with other industry groups in the space to try and create a central hub for being able to do that. And it also enables me to talk to you, like I said, I'll go out and we do workshops and training with people who have never heard of any of this stuff before, and then also go and speak with people that are researching really specifically on different parts of this area, and then try to present that information to everybody in a format that's really easy to understand. And these are all the people that pay my wages, so yay, them. So if I try to sort of simplify this down, this is sort of the 5-hat version, Nerdville end of circular economy. It's the Ellen MacArthur Butterfly Foundation diagram, looks amazing. We can totally nerd out on it. There's a lot of different arrows and things that you can delve into in there. This is what I show tradies who go, circular what? It's just like, keep it really simple, right? It's just a very simple circular. Here's linear. Here's what circular means. It means there is no end. It's just going to keep going round and round and round. And everything should be keeping that in that simple sort of world. So like I said, I do a lot of work with the Australian Circular Economy Hub. Yay, Planet Ark, for getting this up and running, and really, really big advocate for it. And there's a reason why I spend my annual leave and days off doing this work with them, because I genuinely think that this is the area where we can have the most impact for the circular economy, and in reducing waste, which is avoiding it from the start. So the ACE Hub have the 4 strategic pillars. They inspire and amplify. They're there to educate and connect. They're enabling action and supporting and promoting change. And there definitely is a really good community involved in everything that's happening in there at the ACE Hub. If you haven't signed up, please sign up, download the app, post everything in there, post your questions, post your asks. People are really, really collaborative in sort of getting in there and going, hey, does anyone know anyone that does this so I can help out? From the school's perspective, we put things in there going, hey, if you want to be part of my podcast, please tell me and I can come and publicise exactly what you're doing to the masses, like trying to really support and spruik those businesses that are working for solutions in their space. So definitely one of those to-do actions at the end of this conference is to go and join the ACE Hub. And that's not to say that's easy for you because, there's a lot of stuff that's happening in that space, but there's also other things that they're doing top down around working to improve the circular economy. So similarly, there's like 5 business models of circularity. So like this is my 5-hat version, like Nerdville end of things. There's 5 different ways that you can really sort of get your business to be circular. Get circular supplies, look at products as a service, extend product life extensions, sharing platforms around getting all those things together, and then finally around resource recovery at the end. So not dissimilar to anything anyone else has told you today, but hopefully if we just say it 8 times, it'll sink in by the end of the conference and getting in there. And similarly, sometimes that just seems too hard for people, so basically we come down and go, the 1-hat version of this is, hey, regenerate your natural systems, design out waste and pollution, and keep materials in use for longer. And that's a really simple message that we can tell people who don't want to read the details of all the other slides of going, hey, this isn't rocket science, and it doesn't, the phrasing of circular economy can be really daunting for people. But it's pretty simple to do that. Keep nature systems there, design it out, keep it in use for longer. Pretty simple, everyone can usually get hold of that. So this is another one that Beck threw up on the first day, opening of the first day, so hopefully, all the alcohol, you still can remember things from the first day. So coming back into those 10 Rs, okay? And this is an amazing platform. This and the extended waste hierarchy, I think, are 2 really good resources for people who are advanced in this space to sort of really get in there. Starting off with refuse, then reduce, redesign, reuse, repair, refurbish, remanufacture, repurpose, recycle, recover, in that order. And sort of working down that mix without just being too hard up on sitting down the bottom at the recover. But then also as a school, we had to try and simplify for that for people that they could remember it, because 10 Rs are hard to remember. Even I have to read it, and I talk about it all the time. So we came up with that really simple concept of waste as an asset, where the start of the A is for avoid. So find out that there's no need. If there's a nice to have, do without the item. Make do with what you have. Don't buy it, make it yourself. Get it digitally, not physically. Reuse an item. So really up at that A level. And then we talk about sharing. So pooling your possessions, borrowing, renting, leasing items from someone else. Donate, sell, lend, swap, lease items to someone else or someone to repair them. Then we talk about stewardship, where the onus is on the owners. So return faulty items to their maker for repair and replacement. Source items secondhand. Buy to last that are durable, reusable, repairable, and upgradable. And then we talk about evolving. So there's really sort of elusive endings. So retain the value, extending the working life, maintaining, repairing, disassemble items for smart repair and use, donation or sale, increase the value of items by repurposing, upcycling and upgrading components. And then we talk about turn. So the very end doesn't stop, it turns right at the end and comes back around and go on. Turn before you tip the item, before you leave it in landfill or tip to change the course of the action's life. This is where the linear economy ends, but this is where the circular economy comes back around. Energy recovery is better than disposal to landfill, but disposal to land, and essentially coming back into this one key point, disposal to landfill is a failure to recognise the circular value of assets. So if we can start to get that in our framework of that is failure, every tonne, every kilo, every gram that we put in landfill is a failure. In nature, they reuse all assets as it comes back in. It's a very human thing to have waste. And certainly most Indigenous cultures around the world don't understand the concept of waste because everything is reused and you don't want to let anything go because it's so highly valued. And I think that culturally it'd be nice to be able to return to that place as well. So this is where the ACE Hub's procurement working group came in. So this was a group of people who all went through a very vigorous recruitment process. So my personal journey was we had to apply to join part of this group and say, yes, I'm willing to donate my time in order to work towards how we are going to transform Australia's economy into a circular economy, focusing on the benefits of procurement. We had to go through interview processes with the Planet Arc to join this working group, and now we've got this really dedicated group of people together who we meet up 8 times a year, I think, in the end, and sort of to create what we think, where are the gaps and where are those resource gaps? What do we need to try and fill this? How do we then encourage people to go through what's missing? Why aren't people doing this naturally? And so if you look through a lot of the people there's a real mix. There's state government and there's local government, different groups. There's some consultants in the group. There's a lot of NGOs in the group. There are people with vast histories who have worked in different levels of waste and procurement. We've got the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply and the Australian Supply Chain Institute both have representatives on there, so from those big certifying bodies and industry associations in the mix. And then really working together as a group to go, where are the gaps? What do we need to do? How are we as a group going to help people move along that journey? And so this year, one of the things that we're doing in that group is quite literally writing the book on circular procurement. So there are some international texts and best practices that are available in this space. So probably the biggest one is, the federal government do have circular economy procurement purchasing guidelines. Overseas, there's the 8 Steps to Circular Procurement books that are, you can get the English version, or if you prefer to read it in Dutch, you can do that too. Some people think it makes just as much sense in Dutch. But I think that's part of the reason of our group is sort of going, okay, there's a lot of these international best practice stuff that's going on, but how do you do that in Oz, really? We've got geographically, we're a crap ton bigger than the Netherlands, right? So it's like, how are we going to take some of those principles that work in sort of their context, in their culture, in the way that they've got their infrastructure and systems set up and Australianise them? And that's essentially what the procurement working group is doing, is tackling that massive challenge and actually Australianising some of those guidelines and best practices, bringing on case studies, and then working towards the simple things. So if you're at the very start of your journey, it's the checklist that you need. If you're more advanced in the journey, it's look, here's the white paper on exactly where the pros and cons of what you need to push and pull and how you can lead the way in this space. We sort of tackle things from all things. Every type of learning style, we're looking to develop resources in there. Every type of level along the journey, we're looking to develop those sorts of resources there. It was interesting talking through even like the education streams earlier in this conference, and people were sort of asking questions around either or. Should I do this picture or this video? Should I do social media or this? And my answer is do it all. Mostly because people learn differently. And that's one definitely thing that we've found running with the school, is that it's not, we might take the same piece of content and produce it in 27 different ways, because that's how people learn. You need to talk to them on the podcast, you need to repeat the message on a video, you need to also have it separately as an infographic as well as a white paper, and you just need to repeat that message, and not because everybody's going to view all of them individually, but because people learn differently. The message is going to come through at different times. And so definitely that's what we're looking to do and drive all the changes that we need for circular procurement, because we need to turn the tap off. It's step one before we start to clear the water out of the room. Thanks.
Hayley, thank you so much. That was incredible, and just anyone who gets everyone to stand up at the beginning, I think is awesome. I love that. And also, you've got us back 6 minutes. So we have time for some questions for our awesome panel, so please raise your hand. We have one at the back here.
Hi, Christian from Local Government New South Wales. My question is mainly for Jennifer. You talked about the right to repair and the need for the Australian government to, legislate that. Would you consider, having long mandatory warranty periods for, dishwashers and other appliances as an easier fix to sort of make companies, go back and design their products for longer use?
Yeah, definitely. Look, there's a couple of different ways you can approach it. You can have mandatory periods, but we do have, the assumer guarantee. But the big problem that the research has shown is because people don't know how long a product should last, they don't know what their rights are under it. So yes, something like mandatory warranties would absolutely solve the problem, but is that feasible? Is the government going to turn around and take that sort of step? How could you do that really well with business? That's so complicated. So you can take it back a level, and it says even just publishing clear guidelines around washing machines at this price range should last this long allows businesses to respond to that however they would like, but provides the clarity. So yes, the harsh regulation does in the end make the change, but often it has a lot of teething problems along the way, and it's really difficult for governments to actually successfully do. So it doesn't need to go that far to still have a massive change.
In a commercial sense though, one of the best things I've seen is the accountants looking to change the taxation depreciation rules to extend the life cycle out of assets, because at the moment accountants just depreciate them over as fast as they humanly can in order to get the zero asset value on the books. They're looking to change those lengths of time as to how you can depreciate assets, so commercially extend the value of goods in commercial sense.
Any more questions? I know lunch is close. We can smell it, literally. The front here.
Annette Rahotis from My Hat. I'm a bit like you, with My Hat as Reconnect Project. Jennifer, when you were talking, the first retailer that popped into mind from a general consumer perspective was the Bunningses of the world. We see that their business model is built on, sell it cheap, it dies, you have to go buy another one. How do we combat that? Because that's a big force that the government would have to put some sort of mandate up against. How do we use the research that you've developed and come out with that sort of systems approach that says it's the government that needs to mandate? How do we then collectively take that knowledge and influence what the government needs to do?
I think that's one of the things that this kind of piece of work really makes clear, because we're a behaviour change organisation. A lot of people equate behaviour change with voluntary approaches, with things like advertising and marketing, education. Yes, absolutely, that's core. But behaviour change is whatever you need to do in order to get people to do things differently. That includes people buying products. That also includes people making and selling products. But that's the thing that we found, this chicken and egg, this vicious sort of negative feedback cycle between people wanting cheap stuff and businesses therefore making cheap stuff because it gets it. So there's a lot of the research just around showing how else can you make value, how can you make profit in different ways. So that sort of research around all the different business models that's coming out, showing that that there's other ways to make value. What suggests is that you change the other parts of the system first. So you move away from that, you do things like the minimum design standards, you get these other business models about businesses retaining ownership, these other different ways, and slowly people change how they relate to things. Trying to tackle the cheap things first, those pernicious cycles, is really, really tough. So actually get the change around the regulations, the change around the practices for production, the change around consumption in those areas, as we said, that aren't so locked in, but it is going to take a massive change, and it's going to take time to change this culture that's evolved over 40 years to turn it back towards something that we want to see.
Last question.
Claire, this is actually a question from the last session, but it's applicable to this one as well that I didn't get to ask. One of the big pain points in implementing the circular economy principles is not only a lack of sort of standardised and agreed terminology, let alone the execution of it in industry. And I guess I'm wondering, with everything that's going on, this is probably a question from Jenny to you, is is there anything being done to address that? Like, how does that look? Because at the moment we've got people calling things reuse and upcycling and just anything and everything in between, and then the opportunity for greenwashing is quite ripe in that as well.
Yeah. I mean, I'll just very quickly, because it's not my panel, but I think there are agreed terms for circular economy. Hayley showed some of them. There's the 10 Rs. We just need to keep reiterating those things. Like, they're not up for debate. That's the thing. Those are the things that we want to do. And it's not to say we can't change that as new evidence comes along, but we know what we need to do. And worrying about terminology prevents us from doing the actual stuff. I think the other thing is, in the Minister's Circular Economy Advisory Group, one of the things that we've been tasked with doing is helping to develop a circular systems map. I don't really know what that is yet. Probably doing myself out of membership of the group, but something that gives us that kind of framework to say, you can't do what you kind of have to do everything at once, but in the absence of being able to do every single thing all at once, how do you get stuff moving? But I'm going to pass over to...
Yeah, we had the same challenge. So one of the first items that the ASAP Procurement Working Group got together was saying, let's do a roadmap. And then after 6 months in therapy, we gave up on that because it was just kind of so complicated we couldn't turn it into something that was useful. In terms of like educational platforms and training, I think yes, the agreed definitions are there, let's try and get them used. I think there's the same problem we have in carbon, is that people just say carbon, greenhouse gas emissions, what does it mean? And trying to get that vernacular consistent of what's embodied, what's upfront carbon, everything else that's going along with that. So the same challenge we have in circular, to be able to move and sort of get everybody on board with that same sort of thing. And also not be too vetted to specific terms. So like I think I found this probably one of the biggest things working in the realm of sustainability, is that the S word can really alienate people. So sometimes just not using the proper terms is the best way to get through to people. And often when I work with a lot of SMEs, if I said to them, what are your circular practices? They'd be like, blank face. But if I say things like, oh, do you happen to recycle anything? Or what's your waste policy? Or what's your procurement policy around avoiding things to buy? And they go, yeah, well, we try not to buy things that we can, or we borrow them, or dad fixes them in the shed out the back. Like all that sort of stuff happens, but it's just giving them, not being too hung up on the vocabulary around that, but focusing on the action is another one. But with the greenwashing thing, I think that's going to be a big thing moving forward because there's a lot of greenwashing happening. So much so we run webinars on it all the time. We've got another one coming up in a couple of weeks of free ones to try and get people in there going, what is greenwashing? What can't you say? Be very careful about the term recyclable. Be very careful about the term compostable. I know we've had that conversation before, Belle. And like just sort of getting this into people's heads that you have to be really careful and be really specific about what you're talking about.
And I just want to offer a counterpoint because one of the pieces of work that I just briefly flashed up was this National Framework for Waste Prevention. It was actually in the National Framework for Understanding, Communicating and Measuring Waste Prevention, because one of the things that we did find is that once you get from the very broad categories down into what you want to do, language matters, not because anything is right, but because when I say something to you, I mean something. And if that doesn't mean the same thing to you, then we have problems. And we see a lot of that confusion with people not understanding the difference between reuse and recycling, for example. And actually one of the reasons that people put things in the recycling bin is because they think it can be reused. So one of the things that we find is it's just about being really specific about what you mean. So, when we heard this morning about Oma talking about, the reuse sector, actually reuse is like many, many things. So in our framework, we talk about secondhand, passing on, being really specific about what we mean. So our extended waste hierarchy has 8 actions. It breaks avoid and reuse up into 8 different actions to be really specific. You can then break those up into another 5 or 6 with really specific definitions, put together by about 50 different circular economy stakeholders to say, yes, this is a description of an activity that you could do. Now, you don't have to call it the same thing, but if you describe it clearly, then other people will know what you're talking about. And so that's one of the really great things about the framework is it has some really specific definitions that can, be used in different ways, and then we can actually start talking to each other about the same thing.
Thank you so much. Please join me in thanking the panel.